Tom, it's my turn. I get you on Real Vision this time.
I am excited to be here, man. I had so much fun the other way, so this will be a lot of fun.
Well, I don't even know where to start. Let's start with your story. How did Tom get to where he is today? Because there's a lot to unpack in that as we go forwards into your kind of crazy crypto journey as well. So there's a lot to get through. But let's go back in time and go through Tom and his journey.
Yeah, so I'll do it in a nutshell. And any bit you want to go deep, we can. But so I go to film school, and I think I'm going to graduate, get a 3-picture deal, and the rest of my life is set. That is not how it worked. I did not get the 3-picture deal, and find myself in my early 20s really lost and just have no idea how to break into the film industry. And this is pre-YouTube, pre-internet, quite frankly. And so none of the ways that you could do it now existed back then. But I end up meeting these 2 very successful entrepreneurs, and they said, look, you're coming to the world with your hand out. And if you want to control the art, you have to control the resources. And I had written a script that got turned into a feature film, and I was really unhappy with the results. And so that idea just sounded very, very good. And they said, come with us and get rich. They were building a technology company. And I thought, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and get rich. Sounds amazing. And I thought it would take 18 months. And it was a software company. How could it not, become multi-millions in 18 months? And it ended up taking 15 years and multiple companies, but it actually did work. So the twist and turn in there, though, is that about 6.5 years in, I went in and tried to quit and was like, I'm unhappy. I gave $2 million of equity back. I said, look, I'm not going to cross the finish line. I don't think I should get anything for this. And, I'm just going to go feel alive. And so I realized that chasing money was never going to change how I felt inside, and that how I felt inside really mattered. But having money didn't. So literally leave that meeting, having quit, and I'm driving home, and my partners call me up, and they're like, hey, come out to dinner with us. You took us by surprise, let's talk. And long story short, they were like, we feel the same. And so we want to love what we're doing. So what would we have to do as a company to continue to work together? And so we laid out a bunch of principles. Would have to be based on value creation. I'm never going to chase money again. I want to be myself, which we would now say I want to be authentic. I want to build community, and I want to fight for something that I'm passionate about, because what I had realized was the struggle is guaranteed, but the success is not. And so up to that point, everybody was like, hey, Tom, the question you have to ask yourself is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't lose? And so that's what I was doing. I'd get rich, and then I'd build my own studio, and it'll be amazing. But of course, losing is like the most obvious answer. It's like the most likely outcome. And so I decided I was going to ask myself a different question, which was, okay, if I know that I may never be successful, the right question to ask is, what would I do and love every day, even if I were failing? And so go do that. And so that was the mantra, it needed to be tied to meaning and purpose. And so given the 3 personalities of the 3 of us that founded Quest, it ended up being a nutrition company. I was focused on saving my mom.
What was it before? What was it before?
Security software. So we had a security software company.
Security software to nutrition.
Yeah. So we sold that company and started from scratch this nutrition company, building protein bars. Everybody thought we were out of our minds.
Why the hell? Why? Why that? That's quite a pivot, right? I can understand you start a different software company.
I think everybody would have understood that. Yeah. The reason that we did it, 3 very different reasons, if I'm completely honest. So I'll speak for myself. I grew up in a morbidly obese family. And so I've watched people die of, obesity related complications my entire life. And just thought, I'm going to lose my mom and my sister who were morbidly obese. I'm going to lose them way too early. And so this idea of making food that people can choose based on taste, but it happens to be good for them, I'm going to make my mission to end metabolic disease. And I'm going to focus every day on saving my mom and my sister. And that will make me make decisions in the industry that will ensure that I'm adding value rather than just chasing money. And that will allow me to be passionate. So, and this is a real story. So when I'm there at 2 a.m. on a Friday under a piece of equipment working on it, and I swore that I would never work with my hands, that I would never be in a job where I had greasy hands. And so there I am, greasy hands, bloody knuckles. And I'm like, this isn't about protein bars. This is about my mom and my sister. And so that allowed me to show up and fight when things got hard, when they got boring, whatever. And so I knew as we were deciding what we were going to build that I would have that come to my aid. And because I had done my own transformation, I used to be 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And so going through that, learning about food, doing this all while we're at a software company.
I did roughly the same, discovered keto and a few other things and kind of changed my life.
No doubt. Exactly. So wanted to pay all that forward. And I thought, okay, well, if this is what I end up struggling with for the rest of my life, as long as I can imbue this company with storytelling, I'll be happy. And so we built an entire studio inside of Quest to make all of our own content before it was a thing. It's now like self-evident that content is king, but nobody was saying that back then.
What year are we talking about here?
We started thinking about it in like 2008, 2009, and then right at the height of the Great Recession. And then we formally started selling product in 2010.
Because that was still pretty early because there's been a kind of a revolution in understanding the macros in diet. You know, it changed a lot from calorie to macros. And that was pretty early. How did you come across thinking, well, protein bars, that's a better quality snack for people to have? Why did you come across this? Sorry, I'm interested in this.
No, man, I love it. You're asking all the right questions. So the reality was you had three guys that were experimenting with their own bodies. And so we were all trying to add muscle. We were trying to get lean. We were trying to get strong, trying to look good. And through that self-experimentation, I mean, we were reading everything we could get our hands on. And one of my former partners, he was very obsessed with nutrition and the science. And so even though that wasn't his background, we just started going to him and saying, look, what are you trying? What should we be trying? So he's like, try this, try that. And it was working. And so it was like, whoa, like this stuff really works. So I go from, 60 pounds heavier, leaning up, looking really good naked, and being like, I can't believe all this stuff works. Like, this is crazy. And so, then you think, hey, we have a message. So our whole thing, we're a protein bar company, but if you called us up and said, what should I eat to get in shape? Our answer was chicken breast and steamed broccoli. Now, the reason we said that wasn't because we sold it. It's because it was true. And so we wanted to be like really honest about, look, changing your physique is hard. Certain things are true, certain things aren't. What we're trying to create is basically snack foods. We know you're going to eat them. So my mantra was, don't try to change behavior, try to leverage it. So if I know that you're going to eat a cookie or a cake or, a piece of pie, whatever, I want to make a version of that tastes good, but is good for you. And so before you had to choose, either it tasted good or it was good for you, but it wasn't both. And so we really created the first protein bar that tasted good, but didn't have sugar in it. And that required us to become our own manufacturer because all of the equipment previously, you had to put high fructose corn syrup in it to get the right consistency to produce it. And so, because we kept asking, Raoul, why doesn't anybody make this bar? Like, it's so obvious. And because you can make them at home and they're delicious and they don't have sugar. But as soon as you try to make them shelf stable or produce them at scale, now you've got a problem. And so cracking that nut and being right at the moment where the world's beginning to wake up around macros, you're the only person that's ever led with that. And then the fact that we were doing social media before it was called social media. And so you put those three things together and it was just a rocket ship.
And then what happens? You sell it.
Yeah. So, we build a company that's worth $1 billion and you reach a point. We'd been partners for 14 years and it was amazing. Some of the best years of my life. I really cut my teeth as a businessman.
And some of the worst.
And, you get to a point where it's like, we don't agree on how to build the company going forward, but we're so successful now we don't have to. So I said, look, let me spin out the studio into a standalone company. I've got a new thesis I want to explore. This was always I was trying to get rich so I could build a studio, right? So, and now we've done it. And let me spin that out into a standalone company called Impact Theory. And here we are. Yeah, like I said, it worked. It took a lot longer, but it worked.
So talk me through the vision of Impact Theory as well, because it's interesting. I mean, we're going to get there. We're all moving in one direction here, but talk me through Impact Theory. What did you see in media? What year did you start this and what were you trying to achieve?
So we founded the company in 2016, but it really started years before that with what I was doing at Quest.
Yeah.
So it starts when I'm 18. I'm trying to get into film school. I need extra credit. USC is in the middle of one of the worst neighborhoods in all of America. It's absolutely terrible. And to get extra credit, they will send you to like mentor, tutor, whatever you want to think of it, to kids that are struggling. And so I volunteer, I go in, and they give me just this maniac of a kid. And it's an 8-week program. At 6 weeks, you're supposed to tell him, I'm only coming for 6 more weeks. And so, or 2 more weeks. And so I tell him, hey, I'm only coming for 2 more weeks. He goes ballistic, punches this kid that's like twice his size, goes crazy, ugly crying. I have actually, at this point in my life, never seen a human being react like that. It was utterly disorienting. I finally calm him down, and I'm like, is this because I said I'm only coming for 2 more weeks? And he's like, yes. And I said, all right, listen, remember, I'm 18 at this point. And I say, as long as I live in Los Angeles, I will help you with your homework. But you can't act crazy like that. You've got to just come do your homework, because he would milk the system. I'll leave it at that. And I said, I'll come, I'll help you with your homework. And as long as you're good about it, I'll keep coming. And so that becomes an 8.5-year relationship. I end up being essentially a big brother. I don't know it at the time, but he's being abused at home. And so I end up becoming his guardian and help him into foster care. I mean, it's really crazy, life-changing for me. For a long time, I warmed my hands around the idea that I showed him that somebody loved him. And so now, flash forward 15 years later, the foster care system moves him very, very far away. I end up living in London. We lose touch. And 15 years later, I end up having 1,000 employees that remind me of him. And they've grown up in the inner cities. One of those kids held his stepfather while he bled to death from a gunshot wound to the head. Another, his sister, was shot to death in the heart with an AK-47 in his front yard. Another hid under a car while his best friend tried to hold his intestines in because he had been shot point blank range with a shotgun in the stomach. I mean, it's just like, stuff you just can't imagine. And I quickly begin to realize that intelligence is evenly distributed, but what I'll call frame of reference is not. And so growing up in the inner cities, the reason that even though you get equally intelligent people there, but they don't do anything with their lives, is because they don't think they can. And if your beliefs govern your behaviors govern your outcomes. And so if you believe it's not worth trying, then you don't try. And if you don't try, then you'll never succeed. And so I'm encountering all these amazing people. And I'm like, I'm paying you, a factory worker's wage, paid well, but like factory workers only make so much. And so I'm like, man, like you guys are so smart. You could do so much more. So I start what I call Quest University. And I go in and I'm like, I will teach you anything I know about business, life, mindset, whatever. If you want to build a competitive nutrition company, I will teach you how to do it. I went in early. I would stay late. Literally anything they wanted to know. We actually had people go and build competitive nutrition companies. And 2% of those people, it changed their life forever. And I still to this day get calls like, thank you. You have no idea what that meant to me. I'm making 6 figures now. I run a division of this company. It's truly bananas. But 98% did nothing. And so I became obsessed with what would I need to do to reach the 98%, because I'm a scale guy, right? You're never going to hear me say, well, as long as I helped one person. I just want to change because I'm so passionate about humans and what humans are capable of. And I'm not okay with the following statement, which is true, that in most of the developed world, your zip code is the number one predictor of your future success. So I'm like, nope, that's not okay. So how do we change it? And so I tried the direct, like think like this, act like this, and at 2% do something. 98% don't. So what would we have to do to get to the 98%? So my wife and I play this game that we call no bullshit. What would it take? So no bullshit. What would it take to impact the 98%? And we began to research the brain. We began to research cultural movements and just really realized that we had to approach people at what's known as the age of imprinting. So 11 to 15, when you're tremendously swayed by culture. And then we had to create a cultural implement that they would be entertained by and want to engage with, and that we could subtly include elements of empowerment. And so the mission statement became to make sure that nobody makes it to the age of 15 without encountering a growth mindset at scale through story. And obviously, it's partly because of our love and passion. My wife is also a filmmaker by training. And so we decided that we were going to start this studio. And originally I thought I was going to do it inside of Quest. But then as we spun that out, we end up calling it impact theory because this is literally our theory on how to impact people at scale. And so we see it as a funnel system. At the top of the funnel is story. Below that is what you and I are doing right now, which is direct to camera, think like this, act like this, teaching people. And then below that is an even tighter layer, which is our actual university called Impact Theory University, where you can actually take classes and they're, taught like a class, like step 1, do this, step 2. If we do this right, the vast majority of humanity will only ever interact with us as an entertainment platform, the sort of Web3 Disney, if you will. But there is that deeper and deeper use of the ideas that we'll introduce at story level down. So we show people how to actually deploy it and use it in their lives so that we can grow with these kids that we find at 11, but that we've got content for them that will go through to when they bring their kid in and start introducing them to the entertainment side first and then drawing them deeper.
And did you imagine that it would be quite so big? I mean, you've got a huge following on YouTube and other places. Did you think that was going to happen? Because it's not just kids, right? It's everybody. I mean, my assistant, Julie, who you liaise with, she's like, Tom, you're going on Tom's podcast? Oh, my God, I listen to everything he does. I mean, and, Julie's not 15. But so you've had a huge success with that. Was that a surprise, or you worked really hard to try and to build that?
So the one thing I will say I have always had is big dreams. So I've never struggled. And so when I think about being able to help other people, when people struggle to allow themselves to dream big, that's the one part I don't understand. So I've always had massive dreams and just allowed myself to believe I could pull it off.
I always find if you visualize a future state, you can make it happen because you make yourself open to those things.
Correct. And if you're doing it right,
but you can go in the right direction.
Correct. And if you realize that what stands between where you are and where you want to be is a set of skills and that you can acquire those skills, then this really gets interesting. But either people don't think, they don't make the connection, which I'm obsessed with getting the world to understand the following statement. Skills have utility. So you don't read a book to be able to check a list. You don't learn about finance to be able to tell your parents that you have a respectable job. You get good at finance so that you can out trade and that you can buy the right assets and actually accumulate more wealth. And you get good at a skill so that you can build something or create something that other people can't do. Or in the case of my favorite example of this, Kobe Bryant, that you get so good at something by practicing dribbling, shooting, the movements of the game, all of that, that even though the greatest athletes in the world are paid millions of dollars every night to stop you from scoring, he ended up scoring 81 points in a single game. So once you understand the skills have utility and the only thing stopping you to achieving your dreams is skills, then you have what I call the only belief that matters. That if I put time and energy into getting better at this thing, I will actually get better and it will actually let me do something that I need to do to reach my goal. And so now when you believe that, I don't have a hard time looking at a gigantic goal and saying I can do that. I just go, either I have to gain the skills myself or I have to convince somebody with those skills to work with me.
I've always approached it by, I go and live in the future. I'm a macro guy. That's my job. I live in the future. I look back and think, okay, what are the paths to get here? And then you don't have that insurmountable, endless journey ahead. You're actually looking at the other way around, thinking, okay, well, how do I get here? I've got this opportunity. And you acquire skills, you meet people that you need to meet and do that. And before you know it, becomes easier. But if you go forwards, everything looks like every small little, bump in the road looks like a brick wall. But if you're actually standing in the future, there are no brick walls when you look backwards.
It's a really incredible framework that you gave me, that idea. And I think that that's really, really important. Because like you said, you're now putting the pieces together. It's akin to the no bullshit, what would it take? It's like, okay, get yourself in problem solving mode instead of problem finding mode, which most people live in, all like brick wall, brick wall, brick wall. But if you're like on the other side of it already, and you're like, okay, this is possible. And so now what would I have had to have done to overcome those things? Get a wrecking ball. Would a wrecking ball knock down a brick wall? Yes, cool. Now I know this is about wrecking balls, but most people just stop at the brick wall.
Yeah, exactly right. So where does your crypto journey start in all of this?
Yeah, so this is the fun part. So I, be careful, everybody, because you are the stories that you tell yourself. And forever, I told myself, I'm good at getting rich. and I'm not good at investing. And I didn't want to get good into investing. It didn't interest me. It doesn't appeal to me. I'm not a quant. I'm not quant minded in any way, shape, or form. And so every time I would talk to somebody about investing, it felt opaque. Like I couldn't understand the concepts they were trying to explain to me. They just didn't make sense.
Because you're a macro guy and people were trying to give you specific advice.
But Raoul, I don't know that until I meet you and you define what macro is. So the hilarious part of all this is I don't even know enough to know that there's a difference. And so I end up generating a fantastic amount of wealth. I get a money manager and I start resenting the calls I have to do with my money manager. And because I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So it's like, look, this is all confusing and it feels like people are trying to make it confusing. And let me just keep my money. This is what I told my money manager. Keep my money as close to buried in the backyard as humanly possible so that I can just use it. I'm just protect my downside so that I can go over here and build the next thing and I'll funnel my wealth into building this next big thing because that's what I know how to do. And, I'll make all the money that I could ever want there and have joy and fulfillment, building this thing that matters to me. And she kept telling me, Tom, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. You have to be very careful. Your buying power will go down. I'm like, I don't understand any of that. And so, it's like I know the word inflation and I know theoretically it's like 2% a year, but 2% a year doesn't seem that bad. And that's literally, this is like 3 years ago. Okay. This is not a long time ago. And so I'm like, right. Okay, fine. And one of my employees, young kid, starts saying, hey, Tom, you should look at this Bitcoin thing. And I'm like, David, I'm good at making money. I don't want to learn to get good at investing money. And there is a truth to be faced, young David. Young David. Oh, naive David.
I am the wise man, and I will give you the advice.
Yes, let me share something with you. You can be anything you want, David, but not everything. And so all of us have to choose what we're going to put our time and energy into. I choose to put mine into getting good at making money. He's like, okay. And so continue building impact theory. It's going very well, growing 400% year over year. It's wonderful. And David just won't let it go. And he's like, Tom, I know that you don't consider yourself an investor, but please, because here's this kid, he's, 22 and he's making 6 figures and then it's 7 figures. And he's like, almost laughing at how much money we're paying because he's like, well, I'm making so much more over here. Thanks. It's nice. But, he's saying impact theory because he wants to be the kind of entrepreneur that I am. So he's like, I want to learn from you, but crypto's paying my bills kind of thing. So anyway, keeps bringing it up. And he's just like, Tom, I'm telling you, get schmuck insurance, put 1% of your wealth. And so he's like really trying to get me there. But David's approach is more like, well, I don't know, maybe it could be, do your own research. And so he doesn't have what I would need to cut through my sort of, bullheaded vision of the story I'm telling myself. And finally, though, somebody goes, Tom, you need to look at NFTs. Someone I respect tremendously. And so I'm like, I have no idea what that is. And so I go and look at NFTs and I'm like, oh my God, this is digital scarcity. I'd been introduced to digital scarcity 6 years ago. And so the guy showed it to me, he created a company and he referred to it as V Atoms. And I was like, dude, this is going to change my business forever. This is crazy because I'm obsessed with digital art. Long story, we can go down that derail if you want, but immediately I got it. But the technology wasn't ready or maybe culture wasn't ready. Either way, I was like, I ignored it, but I was like, that's really going to be something. And so when NFTs came across my desk, I was like, this is that. I know exactly what this is. Within 72 hours, I'd allocated millions of dollars of development and told the team, we are now going to become a Web3 company. And we began to pivot the company hard about 11 months ago. And so went all in on NFTs, understanding what this is going to mean to the psychology of the average human. But that led me to the blockchain. And as I began to understand blockchain technology, that led me to Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency in general, Ethereum. And as I started building on Ethereum, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be huge. And so now accidentally, I'm meeting people like you and I'm having to learn about investing strategies. But now because I have this anchor, there's something about now I'm very passionate. Now it is my future. And the better I understand the technology, the better I can build. And ironically, the better I understand the technology and the psychology, now the investing side is clear. And I begin to understand what this is because I find macro, right? And I begin to it becomes narrative. What are people doing? How do humans move? How are they going to react to this? What does it mean to grow up? What does it mean to be raised by a parent that grew up playing video games, and now you're growing up playing a video game in which you can create? And what will happen to a generation of people that grew up playing video games in which they can create but didn't own anything? Now, when I introduce, you can own it, now they're like, wait a second, I'm going to spend my time playing and doing all of this, but why can't I own it? I don't understand. Why can't I spin up my own Minecraft server, build on that, come up with something creative and charge people? So it's like, dude, that is something I could see very clearly. And so now, as I'm in this world and I keep hearing about inflation, and then the pandemic kicks off, and I'm looking, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I suddenly become terrified for the average person, right? Because I grew up in Tacoma without money. So in getting rich, I still don't feel like a wealthy person. I still feel like the kid from Tacoma. And so I remember when I first realized that to be an accredited investor, you just had to have $1 million. And so I was like, wait, a day ago, when I didn't have $1 million, I couldn't be an accredited investor. I've learned absolutely nothing about investing, but now because I have a different skill set and $1 million, now I was like, what? And I remember saying, I was like, why aren't people rioting in the streets over this? You were literally making it easy for the rich to get richer. And so all of a sudden I'm like, this is why people have been angry. This is that foment, but they either don't know how to articulate what's actually happening, or maybe there's just no other way for them to go. Now, because of crypto, people are like, deuces, I'm out of here. Like, there's this whole new thing, and it allows me to sidestep all of this insanity. And so then that took me down the rabbit hole of what is money? And as you go down that rabbit hole and you start learning about inflation as theft and all this, I was like, oh my God. So yeah, that's how it all began.
And the other thing, look, the other thing that you had to your advantage, you understood community, because you'd built a community. So suddenly when you have community money and community value and community exchange of value, right? It's a no-brainer when you see NFTs to suddenly think, well, it's not a no-brainer, but your brain's wired that way to suddenly see, okay, the connection is, okay, I see this, it opens it up. So talk to me about, okay, you start with NFTs, you start investing in them, right? You're not an investor, as you stated, or you weren't at the time, but you understand this intuitively. So what do you buy? How do you figure out how to start?
Yeah. So one, I want to really clearly delineate, because me as a creator in the NFT space, I am doing something different. We'll see if it ends up being better. I have strong conviction that it's better, but that will play out over time.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about all that you're doing, but it's that specific entry to NFTs that you got into.
And I look at this and I say, I don't know that I think of this as an investment. I think of Bitcoin as an investment. I think of Ethereum as an investment. And I'm looking at NFTs and I'm like, I want to love these. I don't necessarily want to sell them. So I do dabble in the beginning and I buy some and I flip some and I realize, I'm losing more money than I'm making. And I'm like, this seems like day trading to me. And day trading, the reason that I don't do an actively managed fund is because I don't trust even people that do this for a living to beat the best of the best. So I'd rather just be in a non-actively managed fund. And I'm a builder. So I'm not going to be here all day, every day, looking at the charts, trying to figure out what do you look for, all this, because I kept finding myself, because it's kind of fun, but I kept finding myself distracted by what I wanted to build. So I'm like, am I going to hire somebody to do this for me and to make recommendations? Am I going to find somebody that is a quant and they just say, Tom, go buy this? Am I going to be in 100 discords trying to find alpha and, get in early and all that? And then I was like, look, I'm just going to be honest with myself. Though I am a collector, but I have sold less than 1% of all the things in my entire life that I have ever collected. So what are the odds?
You're a hoarder is what you mean, not a collector. You're a hoarder.
So I hoard things I love, right? So I'm like, okay, that's the truth of me. And now what is the truth of the world? And right now, NFTs attract people that either are into gambling or trading. That's like the big energy right now, which is why people look for alpha. This is why, somebody said this, and it's a little derogatory, so I'm always hesitant to say it, because I am grateful to the energy that traders have brought to the space. If it were not for them, there would be no NFT space. And so I just could not be more grateful that that personality type is there and that people love doing it and all that stuff. Now, most of them are losing money. That's the sort of sad fact. But the energy and the money that it brings into the ecosystem allows infrastructure to be built, which incentivizes other creators to come in. So huge, 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 huge. And I'm so grateful. But when I look at it, what ends up happening is they get really excited. So I'm now in like a lot of these private groups. And so you hear them, right? Very wealthy people going, all right, we going to go swarm on like this thing here. And are we going to buy it? And then they just start asking each other, like, are we done? Like, do we sell? Is this one that are we going to diamond hand this forever? If so, till when? And so I was like, man, they swarm, and they even joke themselves like, we're only going to find this fund for 72 hours and then we're going to move on to something else. And so you get this like, they find all the delta, the arbitrage, and then they move on to the next one. And let's say maybe 1 out of 30, they like really fall in love with and they hold on. And so my thing was I just want to make the 1 in 30 that people latch onto and are like, I love this. That speaks to my personality. And so I don't go in and look for, and this is very early on. I mean, this is me, 10 months ago. I don't go in and look for what I think is going to, 1,000x. I go in and say, who do I think as a builder is going to be here in 10 years? Are they going to do interesting and surprising things that I will enjoy along the way? And if they're really good at this and they do it consistently, then over the next 10 years, this really may be worth something. And so that's how I've approached it. Now, I'm not above the flex. And so I have a punk. I bought that punk to flex. I wanted people to know, like, hey, I'm in this space. I love it. And I can get a cool punk. Bored Apes, right? I found not early, but I found relatively early. I mean, I bought a middle one for 14 ETH, 18 ETH, somewhere between 14 and 18 ETH. Now the floor, at least last check, was like 60 ETH. So it's like, and you feel cool for finding ones, but I thought that was a cool community. I thought it was cool art. I was like, I'm not going to buy it to sell it. In fact, I bought one punk, don't plan to sell. I bought one ape, don't plan to sell. I want to be in the communities. I want to see what they build over time. Like, that's just how I resonate, right? And I hope that they tell stories and then I can fall in love with the characters and the stories and maybe even be a part of it. And so that's what I'm really drawn to. And so I think the move as an NFT collector, because again, I don't consider myself a trader, that people were surprised by. So I saw Mechaverse when they were just getting started. They had like 2,500 followers on Twitter. And I saw the art and was like, this is some of the best mecha art I've ever seen in my life, bar none. Like, this is unreal. And as an absolute connoisseur, if there is a sommelier of mecha, like I'm that, whatever that is, I absolutely love them. And so I've collected, digital versions, digital images of mecha forever. And I see this art and I'm like, whoa, this is special. I watch the hype blow up and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to buy because there's just too much hype. I don't know how you sustain that level, because if you're buying in at whatever 16 ETH, it's like, is that really going to go to 50 ETH? Maybe, but it's like, it's pretty tough. Project crashes. People turn on it. Oh, the art's not differentiated enough, all that. Fair. You like it or you don't like it. I totally get it. But because I'm not buying it because I think it's going to be an investment, I think they're two of the most talented artists I've ever seen in my life, period. So it's like, if they're creating something, I want to be involved. So it crashes, and then I go in and buy. And people are like, what are you doing? Like, this is dead. It's over. I'm like, guys, this art is insane. So because I don't need to sell it, and I just ask myself, am I willing to pay this much money for that piece of art to have it forever? Yes. So that's how I play. Now, if they build over time and do cool stuff, maybe it comes back up. But like, if you buy something that you love and they're telling a story that you're excited about and the community is something that you want to engage in, now you've really got something. And so that's my approach. I will flip some things. I don't think it's bad. I just don't pay close enough attention to that. I'm watching the art. I'm watching the story. So when did you decide you wanted to start your own projects in this space as well? Literally the day I heard about NFTs. So I knew I would build I thought it would be V Atoms, but I knew I would build in digital scarcity 6 years ago. I just didn't know it would be called NFTs. I didn't know he said blockchain, but I didn't really know what that meant. So I don't want it to sound like I was prescient. I wasn't prescient. What I was is I understand the psychology of why this is inevitable. And so now I heard about it. So I had 6 years to sort of, think about it in the back of my mind about ways in which you could surprise and delight. And for me, where AR and the blockchain meet is where this gets unbelievably interesting, because now I can do things in the real world. So we created a Christmas project called Merry Mods. And I don't know whether it will be in 2022 or 2023, but at some point, you will go to the most famous Christmas trees in the world, and there'll be a surprise waiting for you at that tree. So you'll go to Rockefeller Center, you'll go to Bryant Park.
In AR.
And whether you're looking at your phone or you have Apple AR glasses on, based on what's in your wallet, I'm going to have a surprise for you. And in that moment, as some story plays out and you can't see it, and your significant other's like, wait, what are you seeing? And you create that moment, or your kids are the only one that sees it because they're the one that holds the Merry Mod in their wallet. Dude, the number of things that you can do, it's crazy. And we're now, because yesterday for the first time, without me prompting them, somebody referred to Impact Theory as a media and technology company. And I was like, yes, to tell stories today, you also have to be a technology company. Video games already ate entertainment, a decade and a half ago. And now with what's going on in the blockchain, my ability so for instance, on that Christmas tree or below that Christmas tree or skating on the skating rink behind it, whatever we end up doing, I can have your individual NFT appear. I could have your individual NFT appear and write a message in the sky for you. I mean, it's so crazy based on what you hold in your particular wallet. And my obsession, people have heard me say this so many times now, is imagine only on a day where it snows in Central Park, if you happen to have one of my Merry Mods characters, a door is going to appear in the center of one of the baseball diamonds in Central Park. And now in AR, you're going to be able to go through that door and see things that other people standing right next to you can't see. And there, maybe, this is all theoretical right now. I don't want people saying, marking it on their calendar. But to give you an idea of what we're pursuing from a technology standpoint, that there is a virtual thing that you literally see. And through some sort of gamified element, think Pokemon Go, you do something and you capture that NFT. That NFT is now in your wallet. And it has maybe a real world consequence that now you now have a ticket to an in-person party that we're doing, or you get a physical version of your character. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do. And it's like, now, man, we really are limited only by our imagination and what the technology can do, because for the first time ever, you can create something where the long tail value is captured by the community. So I've already sold the Merry Mods NFTs. Now, 95% of the value of those is in the hands of the person that owns them, even though I'm still pouring millions of dollars into building this thing out and making it extraordinary. Because now our selfish desires are aligned. Now they want to go tell people, oh my God, if you have a Merry Mod and you go to Central Park on a day that it snows, right? Like it becomes this like crazy word of mouth. And so all I have to do is tell a better story, surprise and delight, and be consistent, right? Now the great news is this is the rest of my professional career. But the technology allows me to do all this insane stuff and to let the community capture the vast majority of the long tail value. It will change the world. There's no doubt about it.
But where does mission come in with that? So the technology, it's cool, interesting. Where does the Tom part of this come in? What are you trying to do with this?
So all of the stories that we tell all have at the core empowerment. So Merry Mods is the story of a snowman who wants to do more with his life, but he is too afraid that he will melt. And because snowmen are so fragilely put together, all snowmen are like risk averse. They're like, no, what are you doing? But he wants to be, his name is Snowbo, and Snowbo wants to be on Santa's like crack team, but it's dangerous. You know, flying around the world, delivering all this stuff is dangerous. You're going to be in the desert one minute, you're going to be, in the equator the next. And so he can melt or just get knocked apart because he's made out of snow. And of course, this becomes, a tale, a theme about what it really means to be a human. And so the thing about being a human is you are ultimately very fragile and you're easy to emotionally break apart, but you can also put yourself together better, stronger than ever. You can become whatever you want to become. But to do that, you have to face your fears. You have to accept that, yes, you really could get hurt. Yes, you really could fail.
This is the hero's journey, right?
Of course. And so by
all
telling
stories are.
Exactly. Well, all stories, at least that we will tell, because not all stories are.
No.
But by telling that kind of story, we think we can capture the imagination of kids in that really critical part of their life, that age of imprinting, 11 to 15. But then now that you have these ideas, we pull you deeper into the world to make them usable in your real life. So, whether it's a cool little moment where you see Snowbo try to climb to the top of the tree and he falls down and he falls into pieces, but then he puts himself together in a cooler way. I'm back to the AR experience. You can create these little moments that are fun, funny, but they reinforce this character that represents a theme that's actually real in your life. And so if people want to know how we're going to do this without being preachy.
So positive behavioral reinforcement is part of what it's doing here.
Yeah, I say that a set of ideas that I did not create changed my life. Many of those ideas were introduced to me through story. So watching Star Wars introduced me to Yoda. Yoda led me to Taoism. Taoism changed my life. And so when I have looked back and realized that the Matrix became the dominant metaphor for my life in my 20s and gave me the framework that I needed to become an entrepreneur, it's like I lean on story all the time. And we are meaning-making machines as human beings, and we communicate to each other through story. We think in story. And so capturing that to help people get that set of ideas, which you can encapsulate in a growth mindset. And truly, a growth mindset took me from scrounging in my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car, which is a real story, to selling a company for $1 billion. And no one, when I was young, thought I was going to be successful. My mother thought quietly, she was always very encouraging, but quietly assumed I was going to fail when I left for college. My best friend admitted to me one day, oh yeah, I just assumed you were going to marshmallow your way through life. When I went to my now father-in-law to ask for his blessing to marry his daughter, he said no. And the reason that all of these people thought I was going to fail is because at that time in my life, I really was on the path to failure. I didn't have discipline. I didn't have drive. I had big dreams, but I didn't have the discipline to gain the skills that would let me be successful.
I'm looking at NFTs and I'm starting to see some really interesting things that I'm sure will be interesting to you. There's a guy called Ben Mesrich who reached out to me. I didn't know really who he was. I saw him on Twitter. He's a really famous author. He wrote the screenplay and the book that turned into The Social Network, the Zuckerberg story, The Bitcoin Billionaires. He writes for Billions, the show. He writes, a number of things. Amazing guy. What he did is looked at book publishing market and thought, well, why don't I change it and just sell NFTs of chapters, parts of the script, parts of the IP, and raise the capital to write the book. So you're now not getting in advance. You've got no middleman. You've built an audience. So 10,000 people bought his NFTs. He's now got 10,000 is almost enough to get you on New York Times bestseller list right now. So you've now got a groundswell of people who've bought the NFT, getting part of the script, getting part of the IP. So then he starts to write it. And I think, oh my God, not only have we just done this for artists, we've done it for all of these people who desperately want to get published and the book publishers don't care, because you're not Dan Brown. So we might even sign you maybe, but we're not going to promote you. So you self-publish on Kindle. It's lost in a gazillion books and nobody ever finds it. It's like, okay, this is amazing because you're building community from the ground up. And then I thought, just going back to the beginning of our conversation, this is the future of film financing too. You could basically now, in the position you're in, create a community around any film you ever wanted to make by using the power of NFTs. You can even allow that community to develop the script as you go with you, because they can have a DAO-like voting structure. That's really empowering, because the young Tom had no chance. But now forget the fact that you've made money and you're well known. Actually, you can, if you get enough true believers to start with. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It just feels like empowerment is coming, right?
It's going to revolutionize so many corners of every industry, but certainly creative. And when I look at, so I was on a panel on this topic with Quentin Tarantino. And I was like, Quentin, imagine that you're, back at Reservoir Dogs again, and you go around and you're trying to get it made and you just can't get it made. And you could create NFTs that would allow people to basically in some fashion, buy a piece of that film. And you could leverage then the amount of money that you make off of that to make it your way. Or because like he made Reservoir Dogs. Now people know him, believe in him, think he's the next big thing. Say, hey, I'm doing this next film called Pulp Fiction, and I'll distribute whatever 30% of the profits back to the token holders. He could have leveraged that to make way more money than he did to raise the budget for the film.
Or he could have, let's say, each of the characters in Reservoir Dogs, Mr. Orange, Mr. Whatever, you could buy part of that character. And those characters can then, now this is what's being unlocked, those characters now can have a life of their own, much like Marvel did and spun off all these various superheroes. But once you give it to a community, anything can happen.
Yeah, and creating that sandbox so Web3, I think, is going to be, so in fact, one thing I'll go back and say, I previously had built audiences, not communities. Now that I'm in Web3 and I realize that there is a difference between an audience and a community, and that a community is going to be defined by ownership and participation so that they can come in and create. So for instance, we had a guy create an immersive audio experience from Mary Mods. And I was like, and this was us not giving them any resources. And so had we given them like more of the lore or script chunks or even visual assets, whatever, that they could go in and now create more stuff, whether it's fan fiction, a short film, whatever, like that becomes incredible. And so most of the big companies will not be able to bring themselves to do that. They are so paranoid about letting go of their assets. So for companies that are truly Web3, that are open to that want the community to take that stuff, create things, that I think is going to be a paradigm shift, because you get, like, for people that know, 50 Shades of Grey originally started out as Twilight fan fiction. And she just got a big following and ended up, renaming all the characters, and it becomes 50 Shades of Grey. But when you give people incentive, right? So that, hey, if you write in this, we'll give you, in our case, impact tokens, whatever. And those impact tokens you can use within our ecosystem to buy things. It's like now you get people creating because they're incentivized to create. You give them access to certain assets. You put, some bumpers to keep it from, I don't want pornography being made out of Mary Mods, but you put some light restrictions and then let people's creativity go wild. And now you get all this energy, all of this creativity flowing into that space. You get so much attention. It really becomes pretty extraordinary. So yeah, I think that this is going to be the way that people raise funds versus going to a Kickstarter or something like that. This will be the way that people raise funds for this kind of thing, control their own destiny as a creative. You do have to find ways to keep that community engaged. It's not light work. I
was about to come on to this. Is the issue is building a business like you did. There is an end point, which is you can sell it to somebody else who can take it on to other great things. But when you've got a community, you're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would do a community if it wasn't a forever company for me. Because that would be a little bit scary of thinking like, oh God, in 5 years, I plan to sell this thing. And what's that going to mean for them? So that's a really good point. And the community is a beast. it's a beast in the good way, and it's a beast in, hey, you better be careful because it has power unto itself and it can turn on you. And so you have to be incredibly thoughtful about building that community well, about making sure that what you're building as a way to serve them, because they're the people that are really taking a bet on you. And so it's this really interesting dynamic of, for instance, I would not let the script be written by committee, because I think that's the surest way to get a terrible script. Like, there is something about a singular vision that I think is still important, but then giving them things that you do want them to do. And so we're working on a bounty board right now of, here are, 7 things that we really want. We think one of you might be able to do a great job. And if you do, here's what you'll get paid, right up front, either it's cash or points or a mix of both, and let people give a shot and try doing that stuff. Now, that gives them a reason to come back, because you've got this gamified system within the ecosystem. If you're doing it right, like I think we are, you're building technology, giving them reasons to come back, creating a sandbox that's ever expanding that they can play in. And now they want to come back. You're creating these experiences for them. And most importantly, that you're listening. So, and look, I was very clear up front that I'm never going to be in an abusive relationship with my community, right? So I want to serve them. I want to do great things, but I understand how groups can become toxic very fast. So the phrase we use is we tend our garden. So if you're being toxic, it's like we give every outlet for people to say what they think is wrong. I actually want that feedback. It's useful.
Sure.
But if you're just in there flinging feces, it's like you will very quickly be quarantined and we will help you exit. So I think that's critically important, because otherwise, because that's the entry point for, this bigger world of things that you're doing, if that isn't a warm, welcoming, enthusiastic, joyful place to land as a new person, you're just gonna be like, yo, I'm out of here. And so it ends up being the community can either solve or create their own problems. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we're doing right by the community, making sure that they have reasons to be engaged. And look, I actually don't consider myself a community building expert yet. I'm in there, I'm learning, I'm making mistakes, and then making good on that.
Everybody's learning this as we go, right?
No question. But building a community has been the greatest thrill of my life. Like, this is unbelievable. And when I think about where this goes and how much power the community has to elevate the awareness of the company, it's really, really potent. So yeah, I'm very excited, but I am not blind to the massive amount of work that it is to do it well, and how you have to think about them like at all times. And they move in a very different way than an audience.
Okay, so final question. Let's get macro. You're living 5 years in the future. What's happening? What are you, in terms of what you're doing here with the NFTs, impact theory, everything? Where is this going to? What is the general direction?
So I'm telling stories experientially through technology in mixed reality. Sometimes it'll be AR, sometimes it'll be VR, sometimes it'll be a mobile game, sometimes it'll be a thing that you answer questions with as you're watching the movie from the IP that we built. So it's this really 360-degree way of integrating, and that's probably the right word, integrating with the franchise that you support. And yeah, that is it. And Raoul, when I say I can see it so clearly in my head, and I am racing towards it every day, and if I can be honest, there is a significant portion of the space that thinks I'm crazy. And so I encourage people to have what I call the arrogance of belief. And the arrogance of belief is this: not that you know what you're doing, but that you believe you can figure it out. I am so confident that I can figure this out over the next 5 years and that I will not quit, that, yeah, I think impact theory and what we're doing in NFTs is going to be truly revolutionary over the next 5 years. And all I have to do is not quit. And I have a track record of not quitting.
I love this. And also, what people don't understand is that all of this technology that you're alluding to, AR, VR, even, NFT, blockchain, where this is going, these are all exponential. And everyone extracts in a linear fashion. It's like, no bloody way. Look at the AR experience here, or the VR headset. This is shit, Tom. It's never going to work. This is ridiculous. Because they can't see the compounding growth of the technology and the changes that happen. So maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's 6 years, but if things are growing 100% a year, the numbers become ludicrous in terms of the amount of technological change. So what Apple is about to produce in terms of AR, nobody's got their head around. But all they think of is, well, Pokemon Go, that was kind of cool. So, I love that what you're doing is your vision is somewhere that you've made a bet to say the technology will catch up with me or accelerate past me, but I will meet it on the horizon. And I don't need the technology now, which is the crucial thing to allow you to take the risk.
No doubt.
Is you have a belief in that and a belief in yourself, and the two things can come together. And if you get that bet right, you've got the whole bet right.
Yep. And as long as we create compelling experiences with where the technology is today as well, then we'll be able to bridge that gap. And so we're taking a really modular approach. I know what I can do right now today that's fun and cool. And we're going to do that, but we're going to make sure that it stacks with this and the next piece and the next piece so that when we hit that moment on the horizon, that we've been doing these modular bits all along the way that were in and of themselves fun and thrilling.
And there exactly is what we were talking about before. You've stood in the future, you look back and said, how do I get here? I need to do these incremental steps because I can't take the big step because I don't know what the technology is, but this is how we do it, which is brilliant. Listen, my friend, fantastic conversation, really interesting. And I'm sure we'll catch up again with all of this soon.
No doubt. Dude, I love spending time with you, so I am always eager to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll figure out another way soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Take care.
All right, peace.
Hey there, revolutionaries. Thanks for tuning in. For more content like this, head over to realvision.com/crypto and get unfiltered access to the most brilliant minds in finance and crypto. Join our community of lifelong learners for exclusive access, unparalleled education, and unbiased insights.